Welcome to Funny, They Don't Look Jewish, where Judaism appears in the panels. Our purpose is to find characters, stories, and issues of comics that explore explicitly Jewish content. I'm Brandon Bernstein.
I'm Henry Bernstein.
No relation. Oh, that felt so good to do in person, Henry. Hello.
Hello. Welcome to my basement.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here again. Listeners, I have moved back to Chicago, which means we get to record live again instead of over Zoom, and it feels amazing.
Right. Barring, I don't know, a snowstorm or a global pandemic, we will be here together.
Yeah, I think probably we could just like reschedule and be like, after the snowstorm, we'll just record the next one. It'll be okay. I feel less boxed in so many ways. Wow. So excited that we're still doing this also. We were just saying that it's been over 5 years since we started, since the release of our first episode, well over 5 years since we started working on it. And yet we still have content to find, Henry.
It's amazing. Yeah, we're literally physically in the back where we started. So.
Yes, back in the basement where it all began. Everything starts over again. But we didn't have to retroactively redo continuity. This is not Funny They Don't Look Jewish 2.0 or the new 18, the new 36.
Right, what if we had to retcon Jewish Comics Pod, Funny You Don't Look Jewish? Like, what would be the retcon?
What would be the retcon of the news story of it? Oh, man, I don't even know. Like, Secret New Origin. There's Absolute Batman and Ultimate Spider-Man, right. And now the Funny They Don't Look Jewish remix, I guess.
yeah. But it's great to be back.
It's wonderful to be back, and we're doing something I'm excited. I like when we do these sort of different episodes and when we're not focused on just one character, but rather many, because, Henry, today we're going to be looking at, I don't know what else to call them other than like minor supporting characters. We are going to be looking at Jewish characters who've appeared in comics, but they are by no means the title character. They're not the superhero. They're not even the sidekick. These are just random Jews who have appeared, some for an issue, some for a story arc, and then they go off, but they're going to allow us to explore some more Judaism in comics, our favorite thing.
Yeah, and we've done this kind of thing before. You may remember we had our other side character episodes, but this one this is fun because it also explores some familiar comics and some unfamiliar comics.
Absolutely. So I think we're going to start off with an unfamiliar comic to this series. What are we looking at first, Henry?
We are looking at Sandman, Volume 2, Number 8, August 1989. The story is called The Sound of Her Wings, written by Neil Gaiman, penciled by Mike Dringenberg and Malcolm Jones III, colored by Daniel Vozzo, lettered by Todd Klein, and edited by Karen Berger. This is the 90s Sandman, right?
So the late 80s into 90s
late
Sandman.
80s, right, yeah. Late 80s Sandman. So Vertigo Sandman. So why is it Volume 2? Like, I only remember...
You only remember Neil Gaiman having this Sandman.
Yeah.
Well, you may recall, Henry, that we did Sandman Mystery Theater, which followed the Golden Age, Wesley Dodds. And so once upon a time, there was a Sandman Volume 1 that followed that Golden Age hero. And so when Neil Gaiman created Sandman, which retroactively became part of Vertigo and the Vertigo imprint, it had to be Volume 2 because there was already a Sandman.
Right. So it's even though Wesley Dodds is a different character, his comic in the 40s and 50s or whatever.
This is still Volume 2.
Amazing.
Which I love it when that happens, when Volume 2 has like nothing to do with Volume 1 in a certain way. Although I think in the opening Sandman story arc, there's like a brief nod to Wesley Dodds in it.
Yeah.
Also, what fun, we're recording just a little bit after New York Comic Con, where one of the major stories is that DC's bringing back the Vertigo imprint.
Yes,
so how fun.
I feel like, Brennan, even at the time that we've done this podcast, we're talking about DC's bringing back the Vertigo, like they're bringing it back again.
That it already had happened at some point?
They had already brought back Sandman.
I feel like when we were first recording, they brought back the characters, but the imprint itself was dead, right? And like now it's back. I'm so excited. One of my favorite series, The Nice House by the Lake, has been included into Vertigo, but it's back. But that's not our focus. Our focus is Sandman, which is the story following these, for listeners who might not know, but you also maybe saw the Netflix show.
Yeah.
The Sandman is about these 7 endless eternal beings, sort of beings that exist even beyond the gods. And they are these 7 concepts of the universe, including things like destiny, death, delirium, despair, and of course our central character, Dream. So sometimes he's called Morpheus, sometimes he's called Dream. Dream is the central character of the Sandman who was imprisoned in the 20th century and has now escaped and is free to live again. And I love the description that the overall story of the Sandman is the master of dreams learns that one must change or die and makes his choice. That is the description of the entire 75 issue run.
That feels very Jewish, like very high holidays.
Yeah, right. Oh, yeah. This is your Yom Kippur sermon.
Yeah.
Change or die.
Kind of sums up the whole Vozzo, right?
I mean, I don't know if I want to go to that shul anymore, but like it does kind of sum it up. Absolutely. So here we are on page 12. This is a very famous issue, by the way, The Sound of Her Wings, because it's the first appearance of Dream's sister Death, his older sister Death, and he basically spends the whole issue following her around the world, just seeing a day in her life, quote unquote, as it were.
Killing people.
Killing people. Well, guiding them into whatever comes next,
Right,
really.
right.
And on page 12, we see Dream walking with his sister Death, and we hear a little violin tune that Dream notes he last heard it 200 years ago in London. And on page 13, we see an older, larger fiddler. He's playing violin and he's singing. I have no idea what the tune is, but he's singing the words, "Can you rock a romani? Can you pet the flesh? Can you rock a romani? Can you fake a bush?" Which are Romani terms. It turns out that rocker means to speak or to talk. So can you rock a Romani means can you speak Romani? Like, are you able to do this? To powder flash is not apparently a Romani term, but from what I was able to gather, it's an urban way of saying a flash, like a certain type of speak. So patter is like to speak or mumble rapidly or to recite mechanically. And then to fake a bosh just means to play the fiddle. Like, can you speak Romani? Can you play the fiddle? And Death responds that she can indeed patter Romani, but Harry, our fiddler, then confesses he cannot. Because what does he say? I'm no gypsy. I'm a Yid, an old Jew dying lonely in New York, you know? And Death then asks if Harry knows who she is, and he does. He realizes this is the end. So on page 14, Harry asks for her to wait a moment so he can say something that he used to wonder if he would get to say it. And in a real Ashkenazi accent, Henry, what does Harry, our fiddler, say for us?
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one.
And then he expires, which is wild. And then he gets this experience of being outside of his body and getting to like look at it. And then he makes a comment saying, "It's good that I said the Shema. My old man always said it guaranteed you a place in heaven, if you believe in heaven." Which I love the idea that he's like, some Jews might not believe in heaven, right?
That's also very Jewish. And like
right.
He's coded here and visually as like Orthodox and maybe even Hasidic adjacent. Not everyone believes in hell.
Yeah. Right. But it's like I also love the sort of it's like this version of the Pascal's wager where it's like, look, if you believe it, but like I don't know if there's heaven, but if you do, might as well say it, right? Couldn't hurt. It couldn't hurt to say it.
Yeah, and I love that like he's literally dead looking at his dead body standing next to Death and Dream, and he's still kind of questioning whether
100%.
there's heaven or not.
Well, also, right, it's like if you saw death as an embodiment, there's not really Jewish teachings that embody death in that way. So you'd be like, oh, this doesn't feel like what I learned, but if there's a heaven, this will help me get in.
Yeah, at least I'll say I said Shema.
Now, here's the thing. It's a common practice and understanding that one should recite Shema before dying. But have you ever heard this concept that if you say Shema before dying, that it guarantees you a place in heaven?
I don't have evidence of this, Brandon, but anecdotally, going to Orthodox day school from nursery through 12th grade, of all the Narishkeit I was told and stuff to scare us into doing things, I can almost guarantee that we were told at one point, oh, and you should say the Shema before you die. It'll guarantee you a place in heaven. For sure, I heard that from a Rebbe, who was trying to get us to just do mitzvahs, whether we wanted to or not.
Easy way to promise your way in heaven. So I had never quite heard this concept, and it really, like my rabbi senses were tingling as I was like, where does this come from? If you know where this comes from, I'd love to find out because I did not find a source as like this is why reciting Shema guarantees you a place in heaven. But I did find a lot of instances in the Talmud of a whole bunch of other things that are guaranteed to get you into heaven. And I was hoping I could share them with you and have you listen to that.
Yeah,
All
lay it
right.
on me, bro.
The Talmudic term that gets used is like muftach lo makom ba'olam haba, right? Like it like guarantees that person a place in the world to come, right? Which is generally understood as like a heaven sort of thing, right? So here's what could happen. Reciting Psalm 145, Tehillat LeDavid, that is, 3 times a day. Reciting Ashrei 3 times a day gets you a place in heaven.
And that's in the Talmud.
That's in the Talmud in Brachot 4b.
Okay.
Studying halachot every day gets you a place in heaven. Walking 4 cubits in the land of Israel gets you a place in heaven. That's all you got to do is walk around. Here are the wild ones.
So just to recap,
Yeah.
so far we've got saying Tilat LeDavid 3 times a day, learning Jewish law
Every day.
and walking at least 4 cubits in the land of Israel.
Correct.
Okay.
If you see an emission of semen on Yom Kippur and manage to survive the next year, you are guaranteed a place in heaven.
Classic Talmud.
But because the idea is, if you see emission of semen on Yom Kippur, it's like that's a big no-no because it implies you can engage in sexual acts on Yom Kippur. So the thought is like you're probably going to die over the next year, but if you survive, then it's a great thing.
You might not even make it out of that Yom Kippur.
Yeah.
The gates are closing. You're not making it.
But if you do make it the full next year, boom, you got a place in heaven. Wow. Amazing. Answering Yehesh.
Wait, that's not the last one?
No, there's more, Henry. Oh. Answering Yeheshme Rabba Mivorach in a dream. Not in life, in a dream, guarantees you a place in heaven.
Oh, because we were definitely told during davening in high school that you have to answer Yeshmei Rabba Barach in when you hear a Kaddish in order to get into heaven. I definitely was told that.
So I think it's one of those instances where like it's implied, but based on the other conversation happening around it, it seems to be about things that happen in dreams.
Wow.
My understanding. Maybe it shifts. Now here's one. This is one of the wildest, I think. If you dream of having sexual relations with a married woman, you are guaranteed a place in heaven. Now, there's a caveat that says you can't have been thinking about her earlier in the day, right? So it's not like you're like lusting after a married woman and then having it. But if just randomly in your dreams, you have a dream that you have sex with a married woman, it is apparently like an omen and a sign that not only are you guaranteed a place in heaven, but that you're guaranteed someone else's place in heaven. Because it's like she was intended for someone else. And so that spot in heaven, like you get like the extra room in Gan Eden. It was wild stuff I was discovering, Henry. Now, the only reference I saw within all of that in Brachot 57a is that if you dream of yourself reciting the Shema, you are worthy to have the Shekinah rest upon you. But it does not say that lets you get a place in heaven.
So God's presence, you are worthy, like lifting Thor's hammer, you're worthy of God's presence, not the God of thunder, but
yes. Well, the God of thunder and all of
and everything
things.
else. Is you're worthy of that presence being with you.
I love the idea of someone from the Marvel Universe seeing Hashem and being like, are you the God of thunder? And it's like, among other things. And then in the Jerusalem Talmud, there is a statement of Rabbi Meir's that seems to say that anyone who like permanently lives in the land of Israel, eats their profane food in purity, speaks the holy language, so Hebrew, and recites the Shema in the morning and the evening, that person is assured to participate in Olam Haba.
Awesome.
But again, it's not before death. So this wild litany of things I found, I did not find reciting Shema before you die.
Shema was not one of them.
Shema was not one of them. Seeing semen on Yom Kippur and living a year was one of them. Reciting Shema was not somehow.
Wow, that was great.
Yeah.
Brandon. Bravo.
Thank you, Safaria, and everything else that makes this possible. Once again, if you know any more of the story of how reciting Shema before you die led to it, that's it. And believe it or not, that's it for the Jewish content in this issue. It's quick and sweet, but like so powerful to see that depicted. And if you have watched the Netflix Sandman series, there's a beautiful depiction of this exact scene in the TV show.
There's something I have to say, if that's all right.
Of course.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Hear, O Israel, The Lord is our God. The Lord is one. I'm glad I said the Shema. My old man always said it would guarantee you a place in heaven. If you believe in heaven.
I remember being blown away watching it.
Yeah, really incredible to see. We're done with that issue, but we're not done with the Sandman. We're actually returning to the Sandman, Volume 2, number 31 from October 1991. What's this one called?
This is called 3 Septembers and a January, written by Neil Gaiman, penciled and inked by Shawn McManus, colored by Daniel Vozzo, lettered by Todd Klein, edited by Karen Berger.
Yeah, and this issue is about one of my favorite historical figures in the world, Henry. This past summer, I forget, when I was working at summer camp, I would share stories and anecdotes with people. And one of my coworkers from this past summer looked at me and was like, "You have so many random facts memorized." And I didn't think that was the case, but apparently every now and then I have random things memorized, including because of this issue of Sandman that I read in high school and fell in love with. Emperor Joshua Abraham Norton. Have you heard of Emperor Joshua Abraham Norton?
Not until
this. Yeah. So not even the Sandman, but you're saying until this like.
Yeah, exactly. Not the prepping.
Joshua Norton is the first and only emperor of the United States of America. You think we live in a democracy? We had an emperor once upon a time.
Wow.
Or at least that was his title. He's the Emperor of the United States and Protector of Mexico. So Joshua Abraham Norton was born 1818. He died in 1880. He was born in England and raised in South Africa, but he winds up at some point in San Francisco. Now, he was one of San Francisco's early eclectic figures. He actually knew people like Mark Twain. But something happened to Emperor Norton, and he started behaving a little oddly and basically declared himself emperor of the entire country. And he even produced his own currency. But weirdly enough, the residents of San Francisco loved this guy so much that they would actually let his currency serve as legal tender in bars. They let him go around. He once famously actually stopped a race riot from happening. And so because he sort of stepped up and took seriously this idea of being emperor, people actually loved him and sort of accorded him some level of respect. Not everybody, I'm sure. In 1859, he declared himself emperor of the United States and protector of Mexico, was fully living in this fantasy of his. And another fun fact I found out is that his uncle, right? So Joshua Norton's uncle was a man named Benjamin Norton, who apparently was a founding member of the South African Jewish community. And in fact, the very first, I believe, Shabbat services, the very first Jewish services that happened in Cape Town happened in Benjamin Norton's house.
Wow.
His uncle was a founding member of the South African Jewish community and hosted the first services on Hof Street in Cape Town.
Weird.
Yeah.
That is some...
He's got some yichus. So this whole issue basically imagines that as part of a bet with his family, Dream, Morpheus, granted Abraham Norton the ability to dream wildly, and that is what sort of kept him sane. There's a very famous line where one of the characters responds and says his madness keeps him sane. So basically he writes the story of Emperor Norton's life into an issue of Sandman involving all these Sandman figures, which is so cool. And it ends, of course, on page 24 with Joshua Abraham Norton's death in 1880. And on this page, Emperor Norton has died. And much like Harry the Fiddler before him, he is looking upon his dead body. His body's in the rain, and he's meeting Death. And he and Death have a conversation back and forth. Henry, you want to read Death, and I'll read Emperor Norton?
You were Jewish once, weren't you, Joshua? Did you ever hear the story of the 36 tzaddikim?
I do not believe so.
They say that the world rests on the backs of 36 living saints, 36 unselfish men and women. Because of them, the world continues to exist. They are the secret kings and queens of this world.
An odd legend, young lady, but I'm afraid I do not see its significance.
No?
We got a reference to the Lamed Vavnikim, the 36 righteous people, which you might be familiar. It's familiar with the legend, this idea that there are 36 righteous people who are so humble they would never imagine that they could be one of them, that for their sake, the whole world endures.
Right. Yeah, you might, I wouldn't say it's a pretty common Jewish thing, but in certain circles, if you've heard of someone referred to complimentarily as a Lamed Vavnik,
Right.
Like it mean or like maybe at a funeral someone might talk
Yes.
about a great person as a Lamed Vavnik.
Yeah.
That's what it means. It means like the ultimate righteous person that everyone loved.
Absolutely. Just to make sure everyone knows, in Hebrew, every letter has numeric value. A lamed is 30, a vav is 6. And so, since there are 36 righteous people, they're often called the lamed vavniks
Right.
in a sort of Yiddish slang.
And 36, of course, is double high.
Right, double chai
18
in life.
twice.
Yes.
It's a yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually looked into the Talmud also to see like where does this come from, and turns out that the common understanding that we were just discussing of the Lamed Vavnikim actually comes, it's a mixture of two different Talmudic passages. The first comes from Sanhedrin 97b, where Abaye said that the world has no fewer than 36 righteous people in each generation who get to greet the divine presence. But the idea being like the world is no fewer than 36 righteous. But then over in Hulin 92a, we get a statement that there are 45 righteous individuals, and that these 45 righteous individuals, in their merit, the world continues to exist. So Sanhedrin 97b has the number right. Hulin 92a has the concept that the world endures because of these righteous people, and somehow the number from Sanhedrin mixes with the consequence of Hulin, and that's where we end up getting this idea that there are 36 righteous people and the world endures because of them.
Some things about the actual issue that I wanted to get into with
Yeah.
you, Brandon, was so she says, you were Jewish once, weren't you, Joshua? So I'm just wondering what you thought that meant. Did that mean you were Jewish once because you were also alive once? Did you cease to become Jewish once you die and now you're talking to death? Like what did she mean by you were Jewish once? Or
Yeah.
Essentially what did Neil Gaiman
Yeah,
mean by
I
that?
love that concept of it being like, oh, well, when you were alive, you were Jewish, but now you're something else. That could be fun. I think it probably just means that realistically he was born to a Jewish family and didn't engage in the practice and probably didn't think of himself as Jewish, would be my guess. I
Oh,
could
so
be
she
wrong.
meant it like when people say like, "Oh, I'm such a bad Jew," or
Right. Yeah, it's like, yeah, like
Jewish.
yeah, right. Like I think he probably just didn't identify. Like the sense that I got is that at least when he was in his emperor phase, I don't think he was like, I'm an emperor and by the way, I'm Jewish. I think he just kind of turned his back on all that practice. But I do love that Neil captures the humility of she brings up the idea of these 36, and like even hearing it, he couldn't possibly fathom the idea that he could be one of
Right,
them.
right.
Which clearly she's suggesting.
Right. She's not saying, by the way, you're
Yeah.
one of them. Just so you know, you're one
Right.
of them. She's sort of just like, do you know about this thing?
Right. Are you familiar with
Wink.
this concept?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And he immediately puts it away. And then, right, we didn't read it, but she also makes the comment of like she's met so many kings and emperors, and you're my favorite, right? You're the one I like the best.
I like you the best. Yeah.
Yeah. He's not corrupted by genuine power and,
It's so
and
like
authority.
it's so disarming in Sandman, the Sandman verse, when like death is so nice and sweet. You know,
So
you're
cheery. I love it though.
you're
Like,
used to, the Grim Reaper with
sure,
the
with the
Family
scythe
Guy
and the scary voice. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But like how much wonderful would it be if it was just like a cheery, chipper,
Yeah.
right? Like positive force in your life. Like, yeah, we're gonna find out what comes next.
And that comes off in the show too, when Death and Dream are together.
Yes.
They like she has like a likable quality.
Yes, she's very charming.
Yeah.
She's very right. It's like, I mean, it's interesting because it's the suggestion of, well, she's not alive because she's the embodiment of death. So she has so much fondness for life and like a real appreciation, which probably reflects the idea of our mortality is what gives our lives value. It's the fact that our lives come to an end that make us be able to really appreciate the preciousness of this gift of life right now. So she is the embodiment of death, has that appreciation for mortality.
Totally. Yeah. And also, I've never seen it anywhere else really, maybe in that movie with Julia Louis-Dreyfus, but that the idea of death not being like inherently evil,
Right.
or scary, or like I said earlier, going around killing people.
Right.
That like death is like can also be like an ushering angel, like you said, like bringing them to the next life. So like I think here was certainly the first time I saw that concept, and the concept has probably been in other places too. What was the name of that movie with Julia Louis-Dreyfus with the giant bird? That's Death. Tuesday.
Did not see this.
You didn't see Tuesday?
No,
oh,
I missed
I
it.
finally stumped you on a movie.
Yeah. Excited to see.
You should see it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Excited to see.
Anyway.
Happy to. Yeah.
Anyway, it's great we got to cover the Sandman.
It was lovely to get to cover them. And now that's goodbye to DC and goodbye to Vertigo as we're hopping over to some Marvel characters now. We're just moving through these quickly. Our next character is one who also only appears for one issue. And this is Louis Shadow Kravitz, appearing in Heroes for Hire Volume 2, Number 6, January 2007.
This is called Guns, Gems, Robots, and Terrorists. Written
Great
by, yeah, great title. Written by Jimmy Palmiotti and Justin Gray, penciled by Avero Rio, inked by Scott Koblish, Tom Palmer, colored by Brad Anderson. I wanted to say this is like so 90s, but it's the 2000s.
It's so 2000s.
It's the same type of thing.
Yeah. So the people might know that before they were famous for their Netflix specials, Iron Fist and Power Man, or Luke Cage, the Power Man, were characters in the 70s in Marvel who were the heroes for hire. And basically the idea was like, they would save you and they would help you, but you had to pay them, right? It's like they made the money off it. So you could hire the heroes to do their superheroing because, life ain't cheap in New York. Rent's not cheap. They need to be able to do this.
And often Power Man would use the money to help his community.
100%.
I can't say about Iron Fist. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I don't know. I don't know if it's only a retcon or originally, but yeah, he comes from he's like definitely like an industrialist, sort of like a wealthy guy. So I don't know. There's something funny about that. In my mind, just makes me think of, I don't know if you were a Buffy fan.
Of course.
But when Angel gets a spinoff and makes Angel Investigations, and the whole time it's like, we need to pay the bills. We need to charge people. And he's like, I feel awful charging people. This was sort of the opposite of it.
Vampire with the heart of gold. Good old Angel.
Absolutely. So in this series, in Heroes for Hire Volume 2, Colleen Wing and Misty Knight, who were the lovers and partners of Iron Fist and Luke Cage, they have formed a new version of the Heroes for Hire, and this is in the wake of the Marvel crossover Civil War. So when Iron Man is pro-registration and Captain America was anti, and so if heroes aren't registered with the government, they're not allowed to be there. So here is this team of Heroes for Hire that are working, and I never really read it. I really only read this one issue in trying to do the research, and we've got like some real C and D list characters in this comic.
We're digging really deep here. It's kind of like the guy who we're going to cover is so low on that alphabet chart.
Right.
Like we would never come across him.
Oh, the guy. Yeah, but it's like even beyond him, I feel like the other characters he's around are so low. Like Misty Knight is like okay, but
she's at least been on TV. She was had a prominent role in those Netflix shows.
Exactly. So on page 8 of this issue, one of the Heroes for Hire, a guy named Humbug, again, D level at best.
He's like a Blue Beetle knockoff.
Yes. He's escorting a young boy away from the Heroes for Hire offices, and we see a man walk in with long white hair and a very black kippah. This is that sort of classic, traditional, orthodox looking man coming in, and he introduces himself as Louis Shadow Kravitz, and he is the muscle for the 47th Street Mafia. Which, like, okay, I guess there is this Jewish mafia in New York, and he's the muscle for it.
Let's not gloss over. I don't know which character that is, but one of the characters says, "Is he related to Lenny Kravitz?" And Misty Knight says, "Shut it, Otis."
Yes, well, fair enough. A good, yeah. It's like, yeah, come on now. Let's just
pretty common Jewish last name,
yes.
Otis.
But by the way, did I ever tell you that one of my professors in rabbinical school was Rabbi Lenny Kravitz?
No.
Yes, obviously not the musician, but yeah, like we would love being able to be like, oh yeah, we're gonna go take class with Lenny Kravitz right now.
Shout out to Lenny Kravitz.
Yes.
Read to Rabbi Lenny Kravitz.
Yeah. So apparently this Jewish mafia knows the Heroes for Hire because Misty Knight asks, how's Ethel? And Louis responds, she is with God now, but thank you for asking. So, all right, like there's this interesting relationship that exists. I like she is with God now. I don't know if it's necessarily the exact language this man would be using, but like it works. And on page 11, we find out Shadow is hiring them to prevent a series of robberies that are happening in the Diamond District. And this is, like, it just feels very Uncut Gems like to me. This idea of like, all right, there's Jews, they work in the Diamond District, therefore there's a Jewish mafia, they're there for protection, and fine.
Whatever. A little bit in the first season of The Sopranos also.
So the Heroes for Hire accept the job, and Louis sends them off and says to them, Setel shalom v'shuvel shalom. Go in peace and return in peace. While that's technically, like literally right, I've never heard anyone use this particular expression before.
Never.
Have you?
Never. I've only heard from Shalom Aleichem,
Yeah, right.
Boacham L'Shalom, Tzidchem L'Shalom,
Right,
like
right,
that
right.
kind of thing.
Right. Boachem l'shalom, come in peace. Seitchem l'shalom, go in peace. It's like I've looked and I found random websites that have basic expressions in Hebrew that seem to be like Hebrew for Christians that have this phrase. Um, I tried searching and I found a lot of the idea of like lech l'shalom and shuv l'shalom, right? So like go out in peace. In the command form, lech and shu, return in peace, but not sete, not go out in that way and then return. I really don't know why this would be there. And as I kept trying to research this, the problem is I was relying a lot on Google, and most Googling just brings you into these discussions about the difference between lech l'shalom and lech b'shalom, right? And there's this famous Talmudic passage in Brachot 64a that says that because Avshalom, David's son, who dies, that he sort of rested b'shalom, that like that's dangerous. So you always want to wish someone lishalom, to peace, because b'shalom could be referring to like afterlife, right?
Okay.
Like resting in that. So there's that. So he has the le part right, but like it's just a weird phrase, and I really had hoped to be able to find an answer for you all, but I didn't.
But you couldn't.
You're right.
Failed us,
I failed.
Brandon.
I failed you. And our Jewish content is literally just Lewis saying to them, like this Jewish mafia guy saying to them, go in peace and return in peace. And we never see him again. Like, that's it.
Right.
That's it. Which brings us to our concluding character, but thankfully more appearances. Our last character, very excited for this, a guy named Naftali, who made major buzz and had a lot of buzz around him in 2017, 2018, right around the time we were starting the podcast. And Naftali is Kamala Khan's Jewish friend, aka the young Miss Marvel's Jewish friend. And I'm excited for us to learn about him. And we're going to discover him by starting in what issue, Henry?
We're going to be looking at Ms. Marvel Volume 4, number 25, December 2017. By the way, another example of a subsequent volume of a different character.
Absolutely.
The previous 3 Ms. Marvels was a different character, maybe 2. Maybe Volume 3 was Kamala Khan. Anyway, we're looking at Teenage Wasteland Part 1, written by G. Willow Wilson, penciled by Nico Leon, colored by Ian Herring, lettered by VC's Joe Carmagna, edited by Sana Amanat.
Yes. And I think we talked about this when the Miss Marvel TV show came out, but like Kamala Khan, Miss Marvel, is this incredible Pakistani Muslim girl who becomes a superhero. She's obsessed with Miss Marvel, and she's just like such an icon of representation in comics to be able to have this girl who is clearly Muslim, engages with the religion but isn't like fully defined by it, engages with it. And like I feel like I often point to Kamala as the example of like I just want a Jewish version of that. I just want a character who's like family home life is so involved around synagogue and Jewish life, and like the character doesn't have to be like, I just want that around in that same way. So it's really lovely to see that within this Muslim character that we have a Jewish friend.
At least a Jewish friend.
At least a Jewish friend. So we're on page 8 and we are at Kamala's school, or at least her old school, the Coles Academic High School. And we see a kid named Naftali who's clearly wearing a yarmulke, wandering the halls, looking for Kamala, and then being informed that she's not around, to which Naftali responds, but it's Wednesday. Wednesday is sandwich day. So we've never seen this guy before, but immediately there's this implication of, oh, there's a pattern here that like Wednesday is sandwich day, whatever that means.
Wednesday is sandwich day.
Wednesday is sandwich day. And when they press forward, for more to find out what that is, Naftali lets them know that what he has is paper thin, OU certified corned beef, toasted bread, enough horseradish to set up your bowels for a week, fresh from Elite Meat on Newark Avenue. We get Wednesday afternoons off at my yeshiva, so I make a sandwich run for certain select friends who would otherwise be forced to eat ritually dubious cafeteria food. What an intro for this character, Henry.
I mean, he's holding up the sandwich like a lightsaber,
Yes.
It's so heroic.
Well, like it's a holy, like the holy item, this holy relic. Yeah, like it's so heroic. Yes. And so I love that we get like it's OU certified. So it's not only kosher, but we have the Orthodox Union reference in a Marvel comic, right? For anyone who's listening might not know, there's various different bodies that certify food you can buy in the store as being kosher. And one of them is the Orthodox Union or the OU. So this is OU, like a high standard level enough. It's in Newark Avenue. So like they're in Jersey. There's clearly a strong Jewish population in Jersey. And I love the idea of like he goes to yeshiva and they get Wednesday afternoons off. I never went to yeshiva, so I don't know if they got a day off, but I love that.
We definitely did not have a day off in Jewish high school.
But I love that he gets it off. He gets to go and ritually dubious cafeteria food, right? Like food where it's like, we don't know the ritual purity of this food.
Right, like I can imagine Jews experience this too, but I can imagine Ms. Marvel in the cafeteria line and they put some mystery meat on her plate and she says, "Is this halal?" And they're like, yeah, sure. Or I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
And keep the line moving, kid, you know.
I was at an event recently where they had in the sign up form, like lunch is provided. Please let us know your dietary preferences. And I marked kosher and sort of indicated that for me, it's like kosher style. Really, it's like no pork, no shellfish, no meat and milk together. And so when I got to the event, I was asking about where the sandwiches, you know, where the food was and what was available. And I was told like, oh, there's roast beef and there's turkey. And the roast beef, I think, had cheese on it. I was like, okay, well, at least I should be able to get a turkey. And then I grabbed the sandwich. And as I looked at it, I saw there were salami slices on there with the turkey. And it's just like there was pork just put in there. And it's just like the differentiation was what was the main meat. But apparently they both just had like these pork products on it that no one thought about. And it was like there was other food I could go get, thankfully, some like grilled chicken. But it was just so frustrating. Like that's the other thing I think of the ritually dubious, the sort of like they're just not paying attention or caring, or they're just like, oh, why would we need to mention that there's bacon on it? Or why would we need to mention that there's pork on it?
Exactly. Very thoughtful of Naftali.
Very thoughtful. And on page 10, he's continuing to try to find Kamala. He's going all around and he ends up finding her brother, Amir Khan. And there's this really funny interaction. Would you be Amir for us, Henry?
Sure.
And I'll just bring in Naftali's talking to himself and introduce himself as, I'm Kamala's kosher lunch buddy.
In what way kosher?
In all ways, extremely kosher. It's just like, I love the sass of this teenage kid. I love that he's so committed to it. He's like, everything's kosher. Like, like, you get the sense that he's sort of indicating, like, it's just a friendship. There's nothing questionable going on here. Like, it's OU certified and it's also like halakhically acceptable and like, it's halal. Like, it's all the things.
It is, right. And it's like socially, like, it's totally kosher. Like where everyone's being appropriated.
This is not some secret me and her hooking up sort of thing, right? It's just like it's all extremely kosher. I think it was very common for a lot of Muslims in the United States to eat kosher food because it was considered to be of similar, like good enough sort of status. Although I believe that there's also been moves within the Muslim community to get more like halal actual marking instead of just relying on kosher.
You do see it more.
Yeah.
Just like I see more kosher markings than you used to. You see it. Yeah.
Yeah. So then we jump forward to our next issue as we continue. Miss Marvel Volume 4, number 26, Teenage Wasteland Part 2 from January 2018. I believe it's the same creative team. So
yes, everyone's the same.
Amazing. So now Naftali continues his quest, and on page 9, he visits his own Uncle Aaron at the aforementioned Elite Meat on Newark Avenue. Now, I looked into it, Henry, and I found out there is indeed a place called Elite Meat, but it's a butcher. It's in Clinton, New Jersey, and it is not kosher.
I knew you were going to say not
yes.
kosher.
However, there is a place called Hummus Elite in Englewood.
Ooh.
So it seems like it's a made-up place, but like I like the idea of there being a kosher elite meat.
Well, we'll visit Almost Elite in England sometime and they can sign our comic book.
Yeah, it should be great. Naftali explains that he's looking for a girl, meaning Kamala, and I love that his Uncle Aaron responds, "You've got another year left at yeshiva. Far too soon to be thinking about marriage." Now, when I worked on college campuses, we would often have the more modern Orthodox, like very Orthodox kids that would be engaged before they graduated college. He's a high school student with a year left at yeshiva. Is your sense that that would be too early? Yeah.
He strikes me as he goes to yeshiva, but it's like a little more than a yeshiva high school, like I went to high school. So like, and even in those like places, the kids weren't getting married right out of yeshiva. They were first of all going to Israel for a year. Then they might
Then they might
Then they
get
might come
married.
back and get married at 19.
Okay.
But it certainly was not happening in high school. Or like the
It,
way if he was in like a super Haredi yeshiva, then maybe,
right.
but that doesn't, the way I mean, maybe I'm just judging by how he looks, but how
Right.
he's drawn
Yeah.
and his just whole attitude, like he cares about other things other than learning all day.
Right.
So he's not quite that version of
Yeah.
Orthodox.
I guess it's just when I hear far too soon, like that makes me feel like it's like, yeah, it's like 10 years too soon, but it's like he really means like it's 2 years too soon,
Yeah.
right? It's like it's not that. So Naftali continues to explain who he's looking for, describing Kamala Khan, and his uncle Aaron asks, Sephardi? And Naftali responds, no, Pakistani. And I love that Aaron says Sephardi, and I love that it's not a respond of Muslim. I love the respond that it's like there's more to it. There's like this ethnic identity that's at play here.
And by the way,
Yeah,
Aaron doesn't get into it like that's an issue. For him,
absolutely.
it's just
Right.
he gives him Naftali gives him the information that he asked for, and they move on to problem solving.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah, yeah. It's not, I love that there seems to be this understanding of like Jewish and Muslim cooperation or at least chillness happening in New Jersey community.
Yeah, at least in this particular New Jersey community, they all live there and they're used to each other.
Right,
Yeah.
right. That's it for that issue. In Miss Marvel number 27, part 3, there's really not much. As Naftali continues failing to find Kamala, he gets a ride from his cousin Alana, who refers to herself as his heretic cousin, which I just love. Like, I assume that just means that she's either in a reform or a like non-practicing household. She calls herself heretic. And I love that, like, they're still family. They still spend time with each other. Naftali's the Orthodox one, but like it doesn't matter. It's like neat to see that.
Yeah, and she's clearly at an all-girls school with the uniform.
Yeah.
She's not quite wearing a skirt length that would be appropriate for
Mm,
where probably the school he goes to.
right.
And he's looking over the wall to talk to her. Like it's sort of like a machitza. He's not
Oh,
really supposed to be there.
right, right. Well, because she's the heretic cousin, so
Yeah.
she could drive him where he needs to go.
Yeah.
And finally, in the last part of the storyline, Teenage Wasteland Part 4, Miss Marvel Volume 4, number 28 from March 2018, our same creative team. On page 5, Naftali finally finds Kamala. It turns out that she's at a new private high school, and he brings her the sandwich that he's been trying to bring. Hopefully not the exact same one. I feel like unless the whole story takes place in a day, he brings her the sandwich and is there to rescue her in a way. On page 6, he explains that she forgot it was sandwich day, so he has a fresh new sandwich for her. And Kamala is so grateful. She responds and says, everything in the cafeteria here has dubious gelatin or something in it.
So confirmed.
Confirmed,
Yeah.
ritually dubious. To which Naftali responds, I got you, cuz. I got you. And just like there's this beautiful bonding over this like shared practice of not eating pork, of not eating gelatin, of keeping kosher halal. Like it's really lovely to see this bonding that they have like once a week.
It's nice.
It's so nice. It reminds me when I was in high school, I wasn't the only Jew in my school, but I was often the only Jew in my classes. Sometimes there was like 2 other Jews in my year, even, but like not
Wow.
really that many. And I was particularly in a program, I was in the IB, the International Baccalaureate program at my school.
Okay.
And
What does that mean?
The International Baccalaureate was like a program that exists internationally that's basically similar to AP, but it's like all your classes are sort of AP and there's certain requirements. And if you take all the classes and you have to take like certain exams similar to AP exams at the end, but if you get it, you get like a certain amount of college credits and it helps you with like it's internationally recognized. And I've met a number of people who've been in the program. So it was, the school I went to had it and offered it. I was in this program. It was basically a way of trying to get like a better education with a bunch of similar, comparable to AP classes. And there's a young woman in my class, well, at the time I was also young, same age woman, named Maheen. And Maheen is Pakistani and is Muslim. And so I remember like I was the Jewish guy and she was the Muslim girl and everyone else not. And so we just like sometimes, we weren't like the closest, but every now and then we would have this like joking thing and we'd be like, what do we call ourselves? Non-Christian monotheists unite, right? We were just like having this sort of like bonding experience of like being the two who are like, all right, we're not like everyone else here, there's something a little different. So
That's
whenever I
wonderful.
read Naftali and Kamal, it just reminds me, like I was not as observant as Naftali. I don't think Mahim's that observant, but like we had this bonding
Yeah.
of being the Jew and the Muslim surrounded by all these people that were Christian or like assumed sort of default of Christian holidays at the least.
So you were Naftali.
I was the
You did
Naftali.
not have Sandwich Day, though.
We did not have Sandwich Day. We just had non-Christian monotheism.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess our last Miss Marvel related story is in January 2019. We get Miss Marvel Volume 4, number 37, an issue called After the Flood, in which there's been a large flood and all the denizens and residents of Jersey City are all working together. And on page 12, Naftali finds Kamala's baby nephew and comments, "It was a lot more squished looking when I went to say Mazel Tov at the hospital." So the baby's gotten a little older. I love that he went to say Mazel Tov at the hospital. Like, so
So sweet.
sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah,
He's
exactly.
really a thoughtful friend.
He's a very thoughtful friend. And on the next page, page 13, Naftali asks a passerby to bring the baby back to the baby's family to reunite them. Naftali says, "This is not the place for a dramatic reenactment of the life story of Moses." A bit cliche, but like, fine. It's a fun story. It's
Yeah.
cute. And like in July 2023, recently in an issue about the death of Miss Marvel, fallen friend, the death of Miss Marvel, we do get Naftali showing up at the Islamic Center to pay respects after Miss Marvel dies. And he's invited to make, I believe it's pronounced wudu, which is a Muslim practice. And Naftali's like, "I'm actually from the other shop," which is a fun way. Like it's his usual sass. And those are all of our Naftali appearances. And Judaism's peppered in there. But yeah. Henry, what's your take so far on Naftali?
I think this is the like most positive, unproblematic Jewish character we've seen. Like
Yeah.
there's nothing like, well, he did this thing, well, he did that. Like the worst part in it was like a cliche joke about Moses.
Right,
Like,
right. Yeah, it feels very effortless. Like even
yes,
though he's very Jewish and he's clearly representing so much, it just like it doesn't feel like a big deal.
it's a
It's just
part of
part of
who
who he
he is.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is the way that I think we want to see all of our Jewish characters in just this natural way.
It's sort of the perfect embodiment of everything we have critiqued over the last 5 years when a character, even when they're presented positively and we like it, we're always often, not always,
Right.
often we're like, I just wish da 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 da. And I think
Yeah.
in this case we got da 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 da. Like it's
Yes. Yeah, right. Like I'm thinking back to Colossal Boy and especially the Teen Titans Go comic when, right, he's like, "I'm the Jewish member of," and sometimes I think what we critique is the way that Judaism comes up in a way that feels very like, "Hi, I'm the Jewish character. Let me be Jewish
right,
now."
tokenism.
And right, and Naftali feels just so naturally, smoothly, like just flowing into like, "Here I am. There's an Orthodox, like an OU certified sandwich. It's important." Like
Yeah.
he just like clearly lives and breathes Judaism without being fully defined. Like it's weird because in some ways, the only thing I really know about Naftali is that he's Jewish, and yet it doesn't feel cliche in the way that it can with other characters.
You know how in every like modern TV show, like superhero show or something like that, there's always like the snarky, nerdy character pointing out all the meta things, like
Yes.
all the like telling us all the jokes, like,
Right.
oh, here,
Just we see how weird this is too, wink wink.
yeah.
Yeah.
So Naftali feels like that guy, but it's not annoying. It's just I just feel represented by him. Like there's a guy who
Yeah.
sort of knows everything that's going on and is living in the world and being himself at the same time.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's another like he seems very centered and comfortable being himself and comfortable being his Jewish self. Whereas like even, as much as I love how much the Thing engages in his Judaism, there were so many issues where he's like, "Oh, I'm awkward with this. I'm uncomfortable with this. I'm figuring it out."
Yes,
Jews like
yes.
deny, and he's just like so at ease with his own Jewishness.
Or like Moon Knight, last time we saw him, he's literally in therapy over his
Right,
Judaism.
right.
Rightly so. He's got a
Yes,
lot of crazy stuff.
totally.
But here, this kid is just here.
He's just Jewish and
Yeah.
he's unapologetic about it,
Yeah.
which is great to see. The last thing to bring up is just Henry, it's amazing. The same OU, the Orthodox Union that was mentioned in this comic, actually had an interview with G. Willow Wilson in February 2018. Now, I told you about this, but like it's the coolest thing. In Huntington, New York, there's a comic book shop called Escape Pod Comics, and it is run by a Jewish guy named Menachem Luchins. And Menachem, the comic book shop is closed on Shabbat, right? It's a Shomer Shabbat.
Which is like the
Comic
most
shop.
high traffic day for a comic book.
Of
Sometimes
course,
for
Saturdays
comic
are
books,
busy.
it's the only day people are going into the shop other than Wednesday or Tuesday.
Every year since the early 2000s, there is a day called Free Comic Book Day.
First Saturday in May.
It's always a Saturday,
Yeah.
and this place is closed
I wonder
on
if
Saturdays.
I wonder if he does Free Comic Book Day
on the
Sunday.
Sunday instead. Oh man, we got to find that out. I hope so. So they apparently had this giant event. It's really cool. You can Google it and find pictures from it. There's G. Willow Wilson. There's this owner. They like have the sandwich from the comic, and there's this interview between the OU and G. Willow Wilson where Jack Abramowitz asks what made her introduce Naftali to the cast. And I want to read the answer because I think it's so great. So this is all G. Willow Wilson. Naftali came around out of a desire that I had had for quite a while to add an openly Jewish character to the series. We have other characters who we could have passed off as being culturally Jewish or having some kind of Jewish family background, but I thought it was important to have a character in the series who was religious, to whom religious ritual and prayer and belief was of central importance. Because you don't often see that in comic books. You see religion as sort of a cultural background. You see religion there as a kind of a motivating emotional factor for some characters. But the actual practice is something that you don't see a whole lot of, particularly for characters from minority religious backgrounds. So I said, you know what? I'm not just going to retcon an existing character having like a Jewish background. Let's create an entirely new character who's Orthodox or modern Orthodox and shows some of that overlap. Living in a place where we don't have a lot of zabicha butchers, halal meat is not easy to get. Myself and a lot of friends end up eating kosher meat. That's a point of sort of interesting overlap between me and my Jewish friends. I was like, there's a connection right there, and it would be really interesting to explore. I don't think I've ever seen that in a comic book before. Neither have we, Willow.
No, and maybe not since.
Maybe not since. But her answer is like everything I think we look for, right? Like,
I mean, she's a really special person.
Yeah.
She's a pioneer in comic books, and it's great that it's not just for her culture, part of one of her cultures that she wants, represent, has pushed forward representation comics. It's mine too. Yeah, she's a total match. She's a Lamed Vavnik for sure.
100%. Well, speaking of shows, Henry, next time we're going to continue with minor characters on some comic book related TV shows, which we're very excited about. But that's it for now. So until next time, I'm Brandon Bernstein.
I'm Henry Bernstein.
No relation.
Thanks for listening. You can follow us at Jewish Comics Pod on Facebook and Twitter, or you can email us at jewishcomicspodcast@gmail.com. Please don't forget to give us a rating, and you can hit the subscribe button if you haven't already.